All right, guys, welcome to another episode of 4P Soccer. I am your host, Freddy Rojas, alongside our co host, Jerrick Walker. We're here today because I know we've been beating up a lot, especially on the youth soccer, a lot on what it takes to development. Um, we always talk about all the platforms, and sometimes the platforms itself don't really do a benefit into especially a kid's future. Um, I see it here all the time. A lot of these kids that are playing MLS Next, ECNL, ECRL, E64 end up playing somewhere in our JUCO system. Now, does this have to do that the fact that Arizona sucks at developing players, and there's other parts of the country that are really really good, right? Obviously, us compared to Texas, completely different ball game. Us compared to California, completely different ball game. Compared to New York, Florida, and even like Pennsylvania, completely different ballgame. So after a few talks, a few episodes, Jarek and I definitely want to put a composure of what we can do to help you guys be able to put yourself in a situation to be able to talk to some of these coaches. A lot of the times, I will say this: some programs are the coaches are very responsive and are very useful, right? In the professional level, I think having agencies definitely help out as well. The way we're gonna do this is by talking a little bit about the Barcelona Real Madrid game. I definitely want to put that in there because I'm a Real Madrid fan, and I think you guys should deserve to hear what I had to say. One of the things and the biggest criticism that I always say, there's a reason why we call it Barcelona, because I feel like VAR intervened to avoid like a 4-5-1, game. Um, and I think like, see, and I'll tell you this, Jarek, and you can tell me what you think. That Mbappe goal was kind of BS. I get it, offsides by like the pinky of his foot, right? I think it's a little ridiculous that we have to call that, but this is because of goals like that is the reason why I am so excited for the new upcoming rule that they're going to implement in FIFA for the offsides. I mean, that was a spectacular goal by Mbappe, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. I've been dreading this conversation. I've been trying to get us to try to record because I knew this conversation was coming. It's been about a week, right? So I've had time to kind of sit and process. And I was watching the game, and I had my kids here. And for Barcelona and Real Madrid fans, the El Clasico is basically our own little Super Bowl that we get 2 to 3 times a year, right? And even more when we have domestic cups and other trophies where we happen to meet. It's great. Um, I would say the first 20 minutes, I was like, this is the one. We're not going to win this one, right? As a Barcelona fan, I'm watching how well Real Madrid are playing. They were already up. If you took out the offsides and the goals that were called back, it would have been 3-0, I think, within the first 12 to 15 minutes. And I was just like, "Oh my god, it's just not looking good for us." Right? Yam- Yamal wasn't present in that first little bit. We had no offensive attack. Our our back line, the Hansi Flick offensive trap wasn't working, right? And obviously Flick was on the sideline because he decided to get a red card in the previous game, so that didn't help much either.
I'll tell you this, as a coach, right, and you're a coach as well.
Hmm.
Um, I've studied, and sorry to cut you on your
Oh, you're
synopsis, right? But as a coach's stud, I always tell my teams, we're a mixture of Pep, Klopp, Bielsa. Those are like my three big influences, right? So I go to the soccertutor.com. I've had books from Bielsa. I have books from Klopp. I have books from just the gegenpressing itself, because I do think I like the idea of winning the ball high up the pitch, and 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 trying to get be able to score quickly as fast as you can, right? Like Klopp says, rock and roll football. The one thing I will say, and I haven't faced this at the youth level, but sometimes this is where I know playing the high line is a thing, whether it's a possessing team like Pep or a pressing team like Hansi Flick or even Klopp's team, right? But the thing is, when you're playing against like the Mbappes, the Mo Salahs, the Gnabry's, the uh, Mario Sane's, right? You you got to be a little precautious, especially on that offside trap, because the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, one one simple mistake on an offside trap, you're cooked. And so, in that sense, it all depends on is is the center forward that you're facing, is he going to be as smart as, let's say, a Luis Suarez, for example? That when Luis Suarez was at Barcelona, and he would play teams like Tottenham or teams like Liverpool during Klopp's era, he was slightly stayed off sides. So then when the ball gets played this way, and this is a TT Henry, and you guys can go look it up on YouTube, and TT
Mm-hmm.
Henry explains this very well. So like, let's say the ball is here, Suarez is outside, the ball gets played on a switch. Now he's on side. And so, yes, I get it. You maybe want to set up your set. Like, it's like, do you set your center back slightly back? Then you have him offsides, or you keep him onside, right? Do you play a full offside trap, and then now you have him offsides, the ball gets played through, and then now you put him back on side on a counter switch? So there's just so many things that when you're playing against some of these type of players, you have to be quick. You have to
Yep.
be like, how am I going to adjust for this one specific player? Because we all know that most center backs are not that quick. They're good when they
Yeah.
can play their angles, and
Very
they're
technical.
phenomenal. Like Van Dyke, I think Van Dyke is slow as rocks. I mean, slow as molasses per se, but he plays his ankles so well. You think the guy is, as fast as Mbappe. And so the thing is not just only being able to set the outside trap, but you got to have your center backs aware. You have to have maybe place a slightly deeper line than you usually do. Um, there's so many different scenarios, and I do feel like maybe Barcelona did prep it for a different way, but at the same time, you have to give the benefit of the doubt to the player. Maybe the
Yep.
time at that time and period, the back line was like, "Oh, I think we can kind of get away with an offside trap." But you got to remember, you got two of the fastest players, one on the wing and the other one's right down the middle. And let's not even take into consideration that Mastantuono can kill you on a 1v1. And then if you start with Rodrigo, you have three of the fastest guys in the world right against you. So
Yeah.
when it came to that offside trap, I get it. It's you live and die when you're Hansi Flick. You have to live and die by it. But at the same time, you have to be a little bit slightly precautious and say, how am I going to adjust for this? And even like the center back should be thinking and saying, how am I going to be able to stop Mbappe? And then which player do I rather give up? Do I rather give up Vinicius down the flank, or I rather give Mbappe down the middle? If I'm either of them, I rather give Vinicius down the flank, because then you keep him
Yeah.
on the outside, and now you're forcing him to cross in, and you have an opportunity to win a 50-50 header. But anyways, I
Yeah.
will let you finish your spiel. I just had that thought come into mind while you were talking about that.
No. You're absolutely right. Like that Hansi Flick has a really, really good way of having that offside trap, and his players are conditioned to do that, right? So I'm looking at the lineup here. We have Balde playing left back, Eric Garcia playing center back along with Paul Kubarsi and Jules Koundé. That's the back line. To me, that's a pretty solid back line, considering, Araujo has been injured. He's been kind of a hit and miss. And then we have other guys who are coming up through the ranks, right? So as far as like a back line to continue that offsides trap, I think that was a really, really good line. Now, Real Madrid lined up in a 4-4-2. They put Jude Bellingham as a striker. Now, if I remember this correctly, the game in and of itself, right? Madrid shifts, so they don't hold their lines as a 4-4-2 because Mbappe was very much in the center, and I believe Jude Bellingham. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he slid in as almost like a false 9 or a 10 in order to support, and Vinicius was definitely attacking that left-handed channel, especially against we have Pedri who's in. Kabarsi, who's young, but he's a phenomenal player. Jules Koundé, who's he's in the past few years, he's been on injury or he's been recovering from injury, not playing at his 100% for an entire season. But at the end of the day, right, like this is a solid lineup. We have Ferdinand Lopez, Frank de Jong in the midfield, along with Pedri, Marcus Rashford, Ferran Torres, and Lamine Yamal. On the bench here, let's see here. We don't have Lewandowski. He might be coming off of injury. And we don't have where Rafinha wasn't dressed out either. So neither team is at 100% because Trent Alexander-Arnold wasn't playing, Fran Garcia wasn't in, Mendy didn't get any minutes in, Raul Asensio, both are very star-studded casts. But I look back and I look at the stats of this game, and this is where it's no surprise to me, right? Real Madrid had 21 shots, 9 shots on target. Not a very high conversion rate in regard to how many shot attempts and how many are actually good chances on goal.
Again, VAR.
Yeah, and you need to take those away as well, right? So we can maybe count it 25 to 13 if you took away some of the VAR chances that they had. Now, Barcelona had 13 shots with 6 on target. Now, this is where it gets interesting. In the attacking stat line, Real Madrid completely dominated, right? They had more shots on target, but that percentage is very, very low. Now, the possession, Barcelona had 52% possession versus the 48. It says here 617 passes versus 244. 91% pass accuracy, but they also had more fouls, more yellow cards. We tied with red cards, and we had 2 offsides versus Real Madrid's 5. So they're still playing that offensive trap. It just wasn't as effective. And also look at this, 12 corners on Real Madrid's side. So in an offensive stance, Real Madrid dominated this game 100%. And I think if any spectator believed after the first 15 or 20 minutes that, Barcelona is going to come back and win it, when we scored the first goal, I was like, okay, now we're in it. We're tied 1-1. But then the second goal happened, and I'm just like, let's just hope it's not more. Because I don't think the mentality was there for some of the players. You had Lamine Yamal, being Lamine Yamal, a young 18-year-old, talking smack about the Real Madrid players. And those guys, when they might be playing on the national team together, but the club is who pays them. That's who they have loyalty to. And so when you're starting to talk smack about your own house, they're going to take notice and they're going to kind of target you a little bit. And that's kind of what I saw, right? I don't think Lamine Yamal had any, open chances or anything like that. I don't remember anything spectacular coming from his side. Pedri had a really good game. Unfortunately, he got that red card. I think I read this somewhere that this will be his first break in football since January. So he's played in every single game that Barcelona has had. He's played all, if he's played the full 90 or whatever, he's been in every single game, been game ready since January. And it was October 26th. That is so much game for him to play. And the only reason he's getting a break is because he got a red card in the 10th minute of extra time and near the end of the game. Maybe wasn't fully necessary, but I mean, it was still a fight until the very end for these players. It just, didn't go our way. And as I said before, it happened very, very early on. Real Madrid really, really set the tone. And when you set the tone early in games, whether that's through pressing or possession or anything like that, when you can get into the minds of the players like, oh, they're dangerous, they're going to start to back off a little bit, especially with the high press that they had. Who, at the end of the day, who cares if Mbappe was offsides a couple of times? He still scored that banger. And that when he scored, I was like, oh man, that was a good goal. But if I'm a player on the field, I'd be like, oh, they mean business this time. Like, we're not going to win 4 or 5 goals this year. It's just not going to happen. And I think a lot of people anticipated that same kind of mentality. And, we have to put into account the manager wasn't on the sideline. And the assistant's the assistant, right? Things like that can happen. But, yeah, it just, for me, I dreaded the game from watching it in the early stages. I kind of just watched everything unfold, and I was just very much like, can this be over? Because I didn't want to suffer anymore. And that's what it was. It was a hard watch as a Barcelona fan, but I'm sure as a casual fan or as a Real Madrid fan, it was pretty electric. Barcelona still had some shining moments of possession, getting those passes. I mean, 600 passes in a game is insane. That is a lot of passes to happen per minute, even. So, yeah, that's my synopsis analysis of what I saw in the game. I'm not sure, Freddie, if you have any specific moments you wanted to talk about from either side, things that we can kind of break down for our listeners.
I'll give you a little bit of food of thought. Maybe I'll have you dive into it, and then I really want to cut to the really bulky part of that game. Obviously, as a Real Madrid fan, I'm always gonna say that the referees and VAR always are benefiting Barcelona. As a Madrid fan, I do acknowledge, and I want this to be on the record, that referees will always and forever benefit Real Madrid. Always. And if you're a Barcelona fan and you say, oh, but we don't get helped as much as Real Madrid, you're delusional. You are delusional. Because the thing is, what's going to sell more? A final of Barcelona Real Madrid for Copa del Rey, for example, or a final of Barcelona versus Villarreal. A final, they're still going to sell out. Obviously, they're going to want either team to be in a final of sort of something. But at the end of the day, what's going to make them the most money is El Clasico. Because they know that these are two of the largest fan bases in the world. And with that being said, I want to say that to a point, and I get it that Barca fans are going to say, oh, but we were injured and da-da-da, all this stuff. And I'm going to say this like this. I don't fucking care, because when you guys beat us 4-0, guess who wasn't playing? Militao wasn't playing. Alaba wasn't playing. Rudiger wasn't playing. Courtois was injured. So I get it. You guys were injured. We could have beat you guys easily 4-5-0. I feel like VAR kind of saved you guys, saved your ass from a beatdown. And I want to say, I would probably say that in a psychological standpoint, I felt like that kind of defeated a little bit the Real Madrid squad, because it's like, dude, the first half they were gun blazing. That's like, you looked at it and you're like, dude, this looks like like a varsity team versus a JV team. Like, Barcelona was getting barely touches in the first half.
Yeah.
But what happens? VAR comes, and that kind of deflated, I would say, psychologically kind of deflated a little bit the intensity of Real Madrid in the second half. So that kind of changed it a little bit in the second half. But at the end of the day, those are some of the things where a player needs to stay mentally tough, needs to stay mentally aware, because we say it now to youth kids, and then you see it at the professional level, because they're humans. Because I remember when I used to play, sports, organized sports, younger, and a referee, and I saw the referee blowing a certain way, and maybe he was doing his job as neutral as possible, and maybe we were just making that many mistakes. it hurts you a little bit. You start to question yourself a little bit. Um, but that should have not been a thing for Real Madrid to take the foot off the gas.
No.
Um, I know that I personally feel so. I'll say this: that first play in like 2 minutes in, to me, that's a PK. The
Yeah.
Lamine Yamal where he puts his foot in, to me, that's a PK.
Yeah, I was surprised they called it the opposite way because in all the camera angles and even the commentators like that's a pen. That's a pen. And to say that Vinicius fouled him at the very least, it's a slip up, right? I didn't think it was, Vinicius isn't trying to foul Yamal in any sense of the word. I was actually pretty surprised at that call at the end of the day that it was he fouled Yamal on the way in, therefore it's going the other way. That was in my opinion, that was a pretty controversial call.
And for me, that play as well took away. I think that Lamine Yamal situation was more of a PK than the little stupid handball like this. The
Yeah,
defender was
100%.
sliding, right? And I'll tell you this: this is where I go back into the referees saved you guys, because let's put it out there. Let's say that they still miss the handball PK, but then they give the Mbappe goal, they give the PK, and then the other two goals. It's a 4-1 game. Sorry, 4-1. Not 5. I mean, 5 would have made that PK.
Yeah, which should have been a given.
Which I'm like 50-50 about the other PK, but the first PK again, because the thing is, to me, it's like Lamine Yamal puts his foot in, and Vinicius is coming from. He's already winding himself up to take a shot. So I don't understand how is Vinicius at fault there. Now, if Vinicius was if Lamine Yamal puts his leg in first and then Vinicius winds up to kick him, then I would say it's a foul.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I wanna kind of change gears. Still using the same exact game, and it's something about that we've been talking for the longest time, right? Which and I'm gonna segue into this way, especially going into the college recruiting, because I do feel that, for example, there's certain behaviors that we saw in the game that can definitely help kids realize the parameters and the parameters that go into playing at a college level and a professional level. Um, Now, professionally, you skill wise and everything, you're always going to find really, really top talent here. College is here, right? Like there's still a huge gap in between them two and all this stuff. And I'll say this: I'm going to use Vinicius because as a Real Madrid fan, there's a day that I really love him, and then there's the next day that I fucking hate him, where I'm like, sell this guy, right? Send him back to Brazil. Um, if I'm recruiting a college player and I see he gets subbed off and he does the exact same reaction that Vinicius had,
Yep.
I don't care how good you are, I'm not recruiting you. Because you just showed me you're a headache. You're showing me as a college coach or as a former college coach that you don't have discipline, that you think you are above the team. And Vinicius needs to come to a reality check. He will never be bigger than Real Madrid. CR7 understood that.
Yep.
And look where he's at now. And look at the career that he had.
And to kind of interject here, Ronaldo was also older than Vinicius when he came into Real Madrid. So he already had like the star boy, he was Manchester United's guy back in the, late 2000s leading into 2010. He was their guy. And so he kind of had that fandom. Now Vinicius comes in and he's a little bit younger. He does have a lot of hype around him, but it's his his attitude is just so bad
And
when things don't go his way, when he doesn't feel like he should be subbed off, or he feels like he's fouled or this or that. Like we've talked about, like the racial comments, like no one should have to endure that as a professional or as any human being, but specifically as a professional player, no one should have that happen to them.
so and I'll say this too, like I agree with you. Nobody should be saying any racial comments either way in point blank
Yep.
period, right? That's my problem. Vinicius does not have discipline, and I get it. In the heat of the moment, you're playing your biggest rival. The game is going your way. You're having the game of your life. I understand you don't want to be subbed off, but to an extent, this is a criticism to Xavi now. I mean, Xavi is doing really great stuff with Real Madrid. He has him playing really well. There's games where he does. The team looks really, really well. There's games where it looks like it's Ancelotti still managing the chip. Um, Overall, so far, I'll give him an A minus. I think he's doing a good job with the squad. The one thing I will say with Vinicius, my criticism to Xavi is, dude, if you see the homies playing really well, let them finish out the game. Maybe you should have substituted Mbappe first and then Vinicius, but he's trying to do what he can, because I know, to Xavi's point, you're driving a Lamborghini.
Mm-hmm.
Paper wise, to the squad is off the charts. Anybody would pay 80 million euros for almost any of those players on that roster sheet. You put Brahim Diaz in another team, starter. You put
Yep.
Rodrigo in Manchester City, starter. You put you put Lunin. You sell Lunin right now, starter somewhere else. Start first keeper. So it's a loaded squad, and I understand that it's sometimes not easy to manage a loaded squad, because I was there the exact same weekend, like 2 weekends ago, the same weekend of a Clasico. I was there, right? My buddy Zach asked me, "Hey, I need you to manage, these games for me, because I'm going to Vegas for a tournament." It was intimidating, because his 2010s team is a loaded squad too, you know.
Yeah.
And then you still bought the wrong player. And now you're making a tactical mistake, right? Um, but I get it. It's not easy. It's not easy. And I always tell this to Zach, dude. I would never take a team over after you, because, like, I get it. I may know stuff just the way he does, but no. It's a scare. It's the same thing, But he took over Ancelotti after a bad stint, so it cannot get any worse than what it was. He came in at a perfect timing. But the one thing I will say is that Vinicius cannot have that reaction. He cannot.
Especially publicly, right? Like that
Yeah.
needs to be handled in the locker room. And I mean, we talked a little bit about this of like, hey, like maybe Rodrigo needs to go because he's not getting all the minutes that he wants. Like, and other teams are going to look at Vinicius and they're just going to be like, I don't want that guy on my roster,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Do we think Pep wants a Vinicius on his roster? He's a no nonsense guy, or even who am I thinking of? Like Bayern Munich, they don't want him. They don't even need him, but because he's a drama queen, and it brings in so much bad press for the club as well as the manager, because now people are like, can Xabi Alonso handle Vinicius Jr., and what's kind of their relationship? And the club publicly had to say like, hey, they're going to get together and they're going to kind of hash it out between the two of them privately. That's wasting resources on something that shouldn't even be said.
Yeah.
Xavi's your manager. He made a decision. Done.
And to your point, right? I'm gonna tie this into to the recruiting process, right? Because I feel like there's, like, at least in the college level, there's like so many different moments to be able to recruit a player and to see them, right?
Yep.
Not just, are you good, skill enough to come and help my program to get better. Um, because let's say, in my situation, I was an assistant coach, So I brought in a kid from Idaho who did really well for his 2 years that he was here, right? And he was a good kid, had good grades, it was never an issue. So it makes me look good as a recruiter. So then now my head coach can go and be like, I can maybe trust Freddie when it comes to recruiting players because he does have a good because I've there and we'll probably dissect this into different sectors. But one of the main things that a college coach is going to look like is going to look for is this kid going to cause me problems.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the times they look at it from from a grade standpoint. That's why we like to go to multiple games to see these kids to see how they actually are. And I knew the kid from beforehand from coaching against them and things like that, and I knew that he was never a troublemaker. Now, on the other hand, I had a kid on my club team when I was coaching up in Idaho. Calls me up and said, "Hey, coach, I want to play college ball. I want to come play for your program." And I said, uh, "Well, we're gonna call him Tone. We're gonna call him. Actually, we'll call him Michael." Then I go to him and I said, "Michael, do you not recall our last season when we were in club season? What did you do? What did your character say about it? You walked out of practices. You had issues with me. You yelled at me. You yelled at your teammates. I had to kick you out of practices. I had to strip away from your. I had to strip you away from your captain armband, and not just that with me, but you were also having issues with your high school coaches. Now you can come and tell me I've changed. I know I messed up. Like I should have never had. You don't give me a leg to stand on. I cannot go and tell my college coach, "Hey, you could take this kid on your team." I mean, kid had talents. I think Tony, this Michael kid, would have been able to help us, defensively because he was a solid defender. He got red carded multiple times in multiple games. He caused a fight, and the fight against that he had was I wouldn't blame it on him. It was again, you know, a player, and this was more like a racial fight because a player from the different club team, predominantly white, called one of my Hispanic players a very racial term to Hispanics, and then all hell broke loose after that. Um, but he also instigated it. So it's how am I going to be able to go and say, let's take this guy on our team when you are a problem emotionally? You have to be able to have a level head. You cannot let it phase you.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can have an issue and an argument with your coach, but like you said, Jarek, do it in private. You do it in
Yeah.
private. You don't do it in front of your teammates. You don't do it in front of cameras. You don't do it in front of parents. You pull your coach to the side and say, "Hey, coach, we need to have a chat."
Yeah. And there's a couple things as far as the recruiting process goes, right? Like, regardless if you want to go the college route or you want to go the professional route, we can kind of break down I'll have it up, the three necessities that every coach needs, right? And if you're a college coach, it's going to come out to the same thing, and you can weigh in on some of these as we go through them, but um, it's all about affordability. Is the player worth what you are willing to invest in them? So for professional clubs, obviously the first thing that we look at is financial. Can we financially afford you? Now, I can find a player that's a really good striker for €1 million, no problem, right? I'm willing to pay that up front and buy the release clause, all that other stuff. The other thing for affordability is chemical. How does that player play into the system that the manager has, as well as with the teammates? Now, the last one is psychological, and it's kind of going into like what you're saying with college coaches. College, if you have the the available assets to invest in students with their education by providing scholarships or what have you, that is a financial burden to you. You're not paying them to come unless you're a D1 NIL deal, things like that, right? It's a new world that we live in now. But if we're looking at local colleges, financial, can we afford to bring you in and have you come play for us? Chemical, do you fit in the system that we're trying to build or continue the process, as well as mesh well with other teammates that we have, incoming freshmen, leaving sophomores, the coach and everything? And the last one is psychological. Are you going to cause a problem? Because again, you could be the best player in the world. If you have a shitty attitude, you're not worth the money. You're not worth the chemistry. You're not worth the mental headache, right? And if you're there and you're given opportunities, you have to compete. I cannot tell you, because the USL Championship, those rosters, if you're not aware, Freddie, those rosters change every year all the time. Okay. The Phoenix Rising team that we see now is not the same Phoenix Rising team that we saw 2 years ago when they won the championship. A lot of those players play in other teams. Drogba even, right? But, we had Danny Trejo. We had Carlos Harvey. We had Rios Novo, right? Like some of these guys went on to play the MLS, and I think a lot of those guys who helped us win the championship went on to bigger and better things. Kevin Lambert is one of them as well, who plays for the Jamaican national team. As we bring people in and we're looking at who we want to have in these programs, we have to look at these three things. There's probably more, but I think it breaks down to these three simple things. Can we afford them financially? Can we afford them with our chemistry? And can we afford them psychologically? Because let's face it, you can be a really, really cheap player, right? Let's say $75,000. I can go out and buy you right now. You'll fit really, really well in our program, and we can develop you into being a really good striker, right? There's just the archetype of what we need. But if you cannot handle the stress of being in a bigger league or playing in bigger games with crowds that might be a little more vocal than other scenarios, so let's say over in Europe, then it's not worth it.
The Phoenix Rising crowd can get a little vocal in many scenarios. I've been to a few of the games.
100%. I'm a season ticket holder, right? So like I go to the games and like I'm more of a relaxed fan, right? Like I'm like, okay, bad call by the ref, like whatever. I'll talk to the people next to me like that was a shitty call, like whatever. But there are people who are standing up, flipping off the ref. If a player, like if we have an old player that didn't mesh well with us chemically, it's not a very good time for them. And I get it. It's a little bit of the shithousery of trying to psychologically break them down while they're coming into our house. But at the same time, right? Like if those players can't handle that, then it becomes a much bigger issue. And the fans remember that. I'll say this before, we hear your thoughts on those three things. There was an assistant coach on a team that when he was a player said some racial remarks, something about calling ICE on the fans at Phoenix Rising. And if you know, Phoenix is a very heavily Hispanic area, where there's a lot of heritage there. And there was a guy, I remember this just a few weeks ago, he posted on one of the pages and he was like, this is the guy that said this. And that was like 5 or 6 years ago. And he's like, he's trying to explain himself. What a piece of shit. But he was just going off on this assistant coach that said something over 5 years ago when he was a player, playing into that shithousery of fans versus player. So, if you can't handle the pressure of being a professional player, I mean, a lot of those guys wash out. There's a reason why we say a certain percentage of a percentage point make it to the professional level, because you can have the talent, you can be worth the money, you can fit in the right system. But if you cannot handle the pressure of being a professional, because it's now your job, then you're going to get washed out. And it's I feel like it's the same thing with college too, right? Like if you can't handle the pressure of having high intense stakes or not playing as much as you want to, or someone's fighting for your spot, or you lose your scholarship, whatever it is, it's not worth the investment to bring you in. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, yeah, I will tell you this. In my program, I did a lot of emotional control per se. Because if someone from my former program sees this, I don't want them to think that, whatever. And this is just me keeping a lot of things, lightly because there's a lot of things that happen,
Yeah.
obviously, that I disagreed with. So, I was in with 18, 19-year-old kids, that were just graduated high school and still a little bit emotionally, immature. So I had a lot of these conversations like, dude, why are you getting upset because this kid is taking your spot? Just because you're a sophomore doesn't mean you deserve to be having that starting spot, right?
Hmm.
If Coach X, who did the most of the recruiting, does that, and then he decides that he wants to put a massive reset on the program, and the head coach is giving him the freedom to do what he's being told to, what he sees fit for the program, you can't be complaining. And I always told them, and this is one of the things that I always like to tell players. I always try to look at the psychological first, because the thing is, that's going to tell me a lot about your character. That's going to tell me, are you the type of player that if life gives you lemons, are you gonna do lemonade, or are you gonna make strawberry lemonade with it? And I always told them, go read the book Relentless by Tim Grover. I think Tim Grover has, when it comes to mentally toughness, I think and I think every athlete, doesn't matter what sport it is, it doesn't matter whether they're playing professionally or they're playing, you know, JUCO, or playing even at the amateur level. I think I don't think, I know and I feel, right. I'm going to be like a very Mormon missionary right now, that I can testify that the book Relentless will change your life. It will change your attitude of how you perceive things and how you see things. One of my cool favorite quotes, right, and I'll probably read a few quotes from the book, as we go through this podcast. Uh, I'm gonna try to minimize it too, because there's so many really really good quotes on it. So one of the first things I always tell players, in order to know what you really want, this is Tim Grover talking in the book of Relentless, you must first be who you really are. And I'll kind of say, and I used to share this a lot, even with the players, because I felt like it related. As a former member of the church and as a former missionary, my mission president, or for those people that don't know, in the Mormon church, you do a mission for 2 years, and you have leaders that oversees those areas and those missionaries to help them, to help the quote unquote mission work go forward. So, um, my second mission president, he will always tell us, you have to start with the end result in mind. If you are a JUCO player, what is your end result? What is your end goal as an athlete? You want to play at a D1 school? Well, envision yourself playing at a D1 school. Envision yourself wearing that uniform. Go watch some of the games and things of that school, and see what you need to do to be able to get there. If you're a high school student, or even a younger kid who's an eighth grader, just know, do you have the discipline and the mental fortitude to be able to stay controlled with your team? And I'm going to give you a scenario, right? Um, from some of the girls that I used to coach, my players, when they knew that they were playing bad, they would, the team captain, her first instinct once the halftime whistle blew was to look at me, because she can tell whether I was pissed or whether I was cool. She knew that if I'm standing like this, maybe biting my lip a little bit, or having my hands over my lip and thinking like this, and just mute, quiet, not even talking to my assistant coach, she knew that I was living. And what she would do is she would take responsibility and say, "Don't worry, coach. You don't have to. You don't have to reprimand us, because I'll do it for you."
Hmm.
That is someone that knows who they are and what they really want. Because at the same time, if you want to be a college athlete, are you willing to put the extra effort outside of the classroom to be able to be better? And I'm gonna give you an example, and I'll tell you guys this: in a D1 program, they they have like two training sessions a day. D1 program gets up, either they have their morning training session, which will be their typical training session, or they will go out for a morning run with a few of the assistant coaches or an assistant coach, and then they'll do like their morning workouts. They'll go to class, make sure that they're also doing their schoolwork, and if they have to do a part-time job or whatever. And then sometimes late in the evening, you are having your training session or your workout session at the end. Even though you have that loaded schedule, are you willing to find where is an extra 30 minutes or an extra hour that I can put into my craft in my hectic day? That is someone that knows who they are and what they really want. So that's one of the things that you got to look at as a psychological point. This is the reason why I also tell people, right? I remember one time, um, I was having a conversation with another kid from Idaho. He's like, "Hey, I heard you're interested in playing college, because this coach recommended him to me." And he goes to me, he tells me, "Yeah, but I want to stay here in Idaho." Then why didn't you tell it to your coach instead of making me waste my time?
Yeah.
The other thing is, one of the things I used to like to do as a college coach when I had the time. Let's say I'm going to go out and recruit Jerrick. Before I even I'll approach you on two separate occasions. I would either try to approach you on the toughest game that you had, or I will approach you on your best game that you've had. And I'll always try to make sure that I catch at least 2 to 3 games from Jerrick. But I was very strategic on how I would approach these games. So let's say I will go look at your schedule. You're playing, I'll say Mesquite High School because that's who I used to coach for. And I'll say, okay, Jerrick, you're you're a senior in high school, play for Mesquite. Uh, let's see how you do against Seton Catholic. Your big rivals. How are you going to handle when someone comes in, slides slides you studs up, maybe gets a little bit of the ankle. Now you're hurting a little bit. Are you going to be the type of player that's going to ask for a sub right away? Are you going to be the type of player that you're going to try to stick out for it? Are you going to be the type of player that's going to go and retaliate against that player? Because all those things, I'm looking at not just your skill set, but I'm also looking at your behaviors. Then, let's say you had a good game, that was an easy win, whatever. Then I'll go and say, okay, let's see who's going to be your toughest matchup in your schedule. Oh, you're going to play. I'm trying to think of a powerhouse in 4A. Uh, let's say Flagstaff. Flagstaff is always a tough team to beat. Oh, you're gonna play against Flagstaff. Okay, cool. How are you gonna behave? Oh, you're having a crappy game. Okay. Are you the type of player that recognizes that you're having a crappy game, or are you the type of player that's gonna be mad when they sub you out, like Vinicius?
Yeah.
So those are
Yeah.
some of the qualities that I look for, because before I say, you know what, and they say even if you're having a crappy game, are you still willing to fight for it? Because at the end of the day, is can you still fight for that game despite you're having the crappiest game of your life? I'm gonna give you another scenario. I used to tell my girls this all the time. I told them, I was like, look, my job is to make you the best footballer I can. But at the same time, my job is to make sure that you walk away, you knowing that I was the toughest coach you've ever had. Not just because of the play side, not just because of my demands, not just because of everything, but because if you do go to college, I want you to say, this is easy. because Coach Freddie was tough.
Yeah.
And mind you, again, we're playing a game. This one girl looks at me. She was my outside back, but she was one of my outside defenders. I'm gonna say which side because that's gonna kind of say who it was. And she's like, Coach, I need a substitution. And I was like, Are you sure? Like we're attacking. She's kind of just close to my side. She's like, Yeah, I definitely need one. So I looked at the bench and said, Hey, can you go in for so and so? She's like, Yeah, I'll go and play for her. She comes off and starts crying a river. Like she turned into Justin Timberlake. And I said, Dude, what's wrong? She's like, this is a 14-year-old girl. She's like, I'm playing like absolute shit. She was the last girl I've ever expected to say that. And she's like, and that's the reason why I asked you to pull me off the game. And I said, Look, I think otherwise. I thought you were playing well. Now, this is the thing. I need you to get yourself together. If you need to take a moment, take your moment, cry it out, but then re-put yourself together because I need you back on that field. Because I feel like you were playing really, really well. All right, we both had different perspectives, and that's okay. But again, that goes back to a player saying, I know what I want and I see what I want and I want to go after what I want. So that mental portion of the recruiting process, I think is the heaviest part of it all.
Yeah.
Because if I cannot rely on you to stay cool mentally, then there's situations that we run into in the college program, right? Like there was just incidents that happened. Are you going to be the type of player that says, you know what? I fucking care less.
Yeah.
Let me go into a game and start a fight, start a brawl. Because the thing is, and I tried to tell some of the boys is, look, you guys can't do that because once you do that, you guys get red carded. You get suspended for next year. Then it's hard for you to transfer because now you start the season in a red card. You have to play out the suspension. But I feel like the skills is just the cherry on top of everything else. You have the skills.
Yep.
You know what it takes to play there. You have, you definitely should be playing there. But at the end of the day, can you stay mentally strong in every scenario that is given? And to finish that, and before I summarize all of everything that I have to say, this is something that I love about the book Relentless, and this is why I preach it to every single team that I always coach, because it gives you an inside perspective of what kind of player you should be. And he goes and says, Tim Grover, this is Tim Grover's book, and he says, being relentless means demanding more of yourself than anybody else could ever demand of you, knowing that every time you stop, you can still do more. You must do more. And I always tell that to players. Can you demand more of yourself than I can demand for you? If you're going to come into training sessions and you're going to be ready to go, and you're going to be mentally strong, and you're going to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to fight for this game no matter what. Because once you start getting into the higher levels, and people, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, like, yes, can you fit into the system very well? But at the same time, can you win your individual battle? If you're gonna, and I'm gonna say it this way, if you're gonna pussy out of your individual battles, don't play. Simple as that. Don't play.
Yeah, there's a big thing when it comes to competitiveness, and if we were to round this all out, it's all about psychological, right? If you can't compete, and a lot of that is mental. I see it all the time when players are going into a challenge, and right before they get there, they slow down or they stop. That tells me you're giving up. Like psychologically, you're not in it. You're not in it to get the ball. You'd much rather, quote unquote, save yourself, which, I always tell them you could result in more serious injury than if you just went into the tackle. But, we will learn from that. But it's all about the psychological battle with yourself and making sure, like, hey, can you do this? Because the skill level can be taught. I can teach you how to like juggle a ball. I can teach you how to pass. I can teach you how to shoot. I can't teach you to go out and do the work yourself. And that is it is such a hard thing for coaches and even like parents to wrap their heads around, because there are parents who are like, I've coached, I've played professionally, I've done this, I've done that, and my kid is just not as good of a player, and it makes me mad because it makes me look bad. It's like, okay, that's egotistical of you to think that, but you can't make your child do this for themselves. They have to want it by themselves. I'll tell a little anecdote, and then I'll ask you my question about kind of the recruiting process and things like that. Myself, growing up in Florida, I grew up on a cattle ranch, biggest cattle ranch in the United States as far as like cows to acreage because of the laws that they
Is it
have.
Florida?
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
So owned by the Mormon Church, or Ag Reserves, which is a sector of the Mormon Church. Putting it in very, very light terms for the listeners, you know. But I lived about 45 minutes away from the closest club that actually had competitive teams within my age group. And this was back in like 2010, 2011, where, stats and club soccer was big in Florida, but it wasn't like what it was today where we have all these platforms. And so because of where we lived and because of the situation that I found myself in, I couldn't financially play club by driving out 3 times a week and going out to tournaments all over the state. That's a lot to put on myself because my grandparents, while they supported me, they told me straight up, we cannot financially support you in club soccer. We just live too far away. Did that stop me from trying to develop and get better? No. And you can ask my grandma. I would go out every single day with the ball, middle of the field in the middle of nowhere that had soccer goals, and I would practice for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours a day by myself because I was that dedicated to getting better. I was that dedicated to wanting to play at the next level. My journey through soccer isn't, it's not what it is today. It's not a direct pathway, but I found myself in some pretty fortunate situations. But I didn't have anyone harping on my back saying, you have to go out and kick a ball. You have to do this. You have to get better. I had to research myself. I spent hours, at school on the internet trying to find different things that I could do. I would ask players that I knew were really good. I asked coaches. I did all of this work for myself to figure out what I needed to do. And what it did for myself was not only was I beating my battles psychologically every single day, I was developing an IQ for the game at the same time. You couldn't pull me away from the TV on a Saturday when the Premier League was playing because I was watching these guys move and I was taking notes. I was, making sure that they were making these moves, and I would kind of figure out like, hey, why did they do this? And I would go ask questions. But that's part of the psychological battle. It's how much more you want to put into it in order to achieve the next level. Now, from a coaching standpoint, right, Freddie, let's say you're going to a high school game, and usually when coaches go to visit games, they want to let the high school coaches know, hey, I'm going to be visiting your campus. I'm interested in these players. What can you tell me about them? Just to kind of get a synopsis of this. Do you prefer that the high school coaches tell the players like, hey, there are some college coaches who are coming to look, whether they tell that directly to the students that you're looking at or as a whole group? What's your thought on that? Should a coach talk about it, or should they just not say anything and see what happens?
I say not say anything because, for example, let's say I was still with my current community college, and I reach out to you because I know you're definitely coaching high school, and I tell you, hey, what is first and foremost, I would tell you, hey, Jerrick, what is your toughest matchup you'll have this week, or what is the toughest matchup you're gonna have at home? You guys are what, 5A, 6A?
We're 6A.
You tell me, oh, we're playing Castile. I'm gonna use this Castillo as an example because I know Castillo is one of the tougher high school. Or
on the girl side, yes, they're a powerhouse.
No, on the boys side, let's say you tell me you're playing
Perry.
Perry.
For the past 3 years, it was Perry.
You tell me, oh, well, we're gonna go play Perry. Okay, cool. I'll be there. And because the thing is, if let's say you tell me, yeah, these are some of the boys that I think could definitely play. Now I'm gonna have my eye is gonna be mostly closely on them, but at the same time, I'm also gonna be looking at the big picture. I want to see how they're gonna react on a bad call. I want to see, are they going to be the type of player that's going to run their mouth at the referees? Are they going to be the type of player that's going to come and start, cursing out their teammates? Are they going to be the type of player, you know, you fill in the blank, right? I
Yeah.
prefer you not to say that because I want to see them in their natural habitat per se. Um, that's what I would do. I would tell you, give me your toughest game. Let me go watch them and let me see how they behave. I think when you try to tell them, hey, a coach is going to come in psychologically, maybe the players might get a little nervous, not going to play to their best. But then at the same time, they're going to be like, oh, there's a college coach in the stands, and I know that they're in the stands, so I don't want to. If something happens, I don't want to get in a rough, ruffling the feathers or in a scuffle, right? If they're the type of players that usually get in scuffles, type of thing. I
Yeah.
want to see it happen. I want to see how they behave if there is a scuffle that pops out. So that's why I prefer for a coach not to say anything.
Now, what if it's a bad team? So we talked about good teams. You want to see how they do against like top teams in the state, potentially, because at one point Perry was ranked nationally for their season. Because I know the East Coast teams play in the fall. Um, what about teams that are like bottom of the barrel? You know that they're going to win. What about that scenario?
I still don't want them to know
Okay.
because this is the thing. You're going into a game that you're gonna go blow out the door on this team. I want to see how quickly can they take care of business because this is how I portray it, right, and this is how I always look at it. If you know you're gonna go in and blow the door wide open on this team, are you gonna come at 50% or are you still gonna come out at 100%? Because one of the greatest things that Tim Grover says in that book, Relentless, is that there's three types of players. You have the coolers, the cleaners, and the closers, right? The coolers are your rotation players. You can plug them in anywhere. They're just there to coast and help you get the job done, right? And they're the guys that that play the garbage minutes, or they're the rotational guys that you just plug in here and there. Then you're gonna have the closers that they live and die for those 15 minutes of the game, that the game is on the line, you know, just like pitching in baseball. It's a they almost every team has a specific closer for on their team. There's a reason why those pitchers don't start a game because they live for the thrill of closing out the game, especially like they love it when it's like a 3-2 game, top of the nine, you going in, fresh arm. They live for that moment. They live for those 30 minutes. Like that. That is their zen. You don't put a closer to start you. You don't put a closer to open up a pitching game for you, to open up a baseball game for you. You put them on the last inning or the bottom of the eighth going into the ninth inning. The closers just live for in soccer, they will live for those 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes of the match. They love those games. You can rely on them for that. Your cleaners are the ones that come in, they demand more from their teammates, and they're gonna always, doesn't matter what game it is, they're gonna always come in and take care of business. At practice, at a game, they're gonna be the ones that set the standard. Right? These are your Sergio Ramos. These are your Cristiano Ronaldos. These are your Lionel Messi's. These are your in this case Mbappe. I would say Mbappe is a cleaner in that sense because he's willing to put in the extra effort, and he will always sacrifice himself for the team. And he will always be the guy that says, like even last season, this is where I started really seeing it click in his head, because there was at one point that he said, if Real Madrid plays bad, I'm one of the reasons why they play bad, and I got to do better. And the cleaners is going to be the ones that take that kind of responsibility. And so, are you a cleaner in that sense of like, okay, we're gonna come in and we're gonna play, I don't know, Marco Zaniza, for example. Can we come in and take care of business, blow them up right after, you know, knock the door wide open, go up 7-0 in the first half. So then the second half, all I have to do is say, okay, coach, if you need me, I'm still here. But whatever decisions you make, I'm still here for you. Can you go and take care of business quickly? So let's say we go into the second half, and I say, you know what, Jerrick, you did such a great job. You scored 2 goals, you had 2 assists, you took care of business right from the get go. You wanted that ball possession from the get go. I'm gonna give you the second half. Take it off, because I know that the rest of your teams are coolers and coolers and closers, that they'll be able to close out the second half of the game, because they're dying to have those minutes, because it's an easy team that they want to win. So, me personally, that's kind of like the mental aspect. That's kind of what I always look for in players. Do you have the skills and all the stuff to be able to play college? Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, is I'm also looking at your mental state.
Yeah. And I think as players go in to the recruiting process, right? Like, it's always nice to know what the rules are. Right now we're in tryouts, right? And we were talking to a parent because we had a kid who's trying out, and we saw a little something in him, and we're like, hey, we asked him, hey, where are you playing club? Oh, I'm not playing for club right now. What age group are you? I'm this age group. Oh, we coach that age group and we need another player. Do you want to come play for club after high school? Yeah. Of course I want to. Okay, let's talk to your parents. We get to talk to the mom today, and she said, yeah, I'm getting calls from colleges right now about my son. And we're all like, that doesn't make sense. He's not playing club. No one really knows who he is. How did they get your information? Like that, those are the questions we're kind of leading into it. And we had to kind of tell her, like, don't do anything with colleges because he's a freshman. We don't want him to be ineligible or have anything really awkward or standoffish to that. But I think understanding the rules of recruitment is one of the biggest things that's going to benefit younger viewers or younger listeners that we have. Because if you don't understand the rules, you can't, when the NCAA comes down on you and says you were in violation of this, you can't say, well, I didn't know what the rules were. Because it's not, ignorance doesn't plead innocence, right? And so as we move along in the series of talking about recruitment and developing and all of that, getting to the next level, I think it's important for our listeners to understand the rules and the expectations of what college coaches are looking for, especially when we know that they are building a program for the future, right? So we had a player. I'll give this example. We have a player. We have a coach who was on the staff for the past few years, and he coaches at a very, very good college here in Arizona. And the player, I will say, is probably,
Which school?
I don't want to say. You can probably guess. But one of the players that I've seen has been with him at the club level, been at the high school level, and he is probably one of the more dominating players because he's 6'2", just built like a tree, and just technically he's not the greatest. He's developed a lot since he's been in JUCO, right? But there are times where, from me looking on the outside, I'm looking at like how their interactions, and I heard, hey, a special D1 school is coming to watch him play this game, and they're not really saying anything. They're kind of keeping it to the chest. And eventually someone called this out, but they're like, you're coaching for college and you're hiding this player to keep him from getting an opportunity that's better for him and worse for you. Because let's face it, if you're an assistant coach in a college program and you come in and bring in this baller to your program, you're going to get some accolades, right? And if that player develops and goes on to a D1 school, you're going to get that accolade because you get to have that shiny little like tag of, I recruited that kid, I developed that kid, and I get to carry that with me, right? I developed this amazing player. Now, this player, not only in the JUCO league, right? He went on to play in the USL2. And when that word got around that he was trying to go to USL2, the coach who a lot of people felt were kind of trying to keep things under wraps, under the rug, he's like, why would he go to USL2? That's dumb. Go the college route. And when he's pressed about it, he's like, well, I don't want him to get hurt because if he's hurt, he can't play college. It's like, there it is. You don't want him to have better opportunities because it lessens your impact on his development. And that's kind of why I was asking what would you rather have the coaches do? Tell the player or not tell the player? And I think, psychologically and from the outside perspective of a college coach, that definitely makes sense. You want to see them how they are in a day-to-day game. Right.
And I'll tell you this, me in that scenario, um, and I'll say this too, right? Like at my current organization, they got upset at the current coach for the UPSL because it's like, dude, we have all these kids that are talented, and then you're putting some of these like, has-beens on the premier team. Why don't you give some of the opportunities to some of the younger guys? And I'm all for. I always told kids, dude, if you have something better than comes your way, just let me know, right? I The one thing I will say is, yes, there's certain JUCO programs that you should take over anything else, but at the same time, I don't. That again, I do agree with you. Sometimes just does JUCO coaches do harm to the kids, but at the same time, that coach should be saying, well, if a D1 school comes and recruits him, he needs to go because that's better. Now it depends what kind of school you're looking into. Because, for example, I will say, oh, I think you did tell me the school, but I will say this. Let's say, for example, Phoenix College itself in the men's side is probably better than a lot of D2s and some D1 programs. Now the problem is a lot of these kids go to this Phoenix College and they don't. There's not a turnover of them going somewhere else. So what is the point in being a top five program every single year, and then your players don't move on? You should have a huge turnover of players every single year. The one thing I would say about my former program is we struggled record wise, but we had a pretty decent turnover when it got to kids going to somewhere else. And if there's any kids out there that listen to this or whatever, don't let don't let your coach. And this is the thing, like if I'm that coach, if I was that coach and that was my player, I'll be like, good for you for trying to go and play USL 2. Because at the end of the day, those USL 2 players, most of them are all D1 athletes. How are you doing against them? Because if
Yeah.
you can hang with them, let's say you also play in a UPSL team, for example, and UPSL teams are some UPSL teams are pretty decent, and I would say probably better than some other USL 2 teams. But a lot of the times, the UPSL teams are filled with a few former professional soccer players here and there, and same thing with USL 2. Dude, why not? Why don't you put yourself out there like that? So you tell that kid, hey, keep doing what you're doing. That coach should be shamed in himself because he is stopping the development and the growth of that player. Like And I want to put this into perspective. When I was at my former high school, and people can look this up, we played, and I'll probably say the score. And you go look at the scoreboard when we played Flagstaff last year. Actually, go look at the scoreboard when we played Flagstaff 2 years ago. 4-0 with 7 or 8 girls on that squad that could have potentially played at least JUCO, and we lose 4-0 to Flagstaff. A year later, those girls are not there anymore. Probably have like 3 or 4 girls that are returning that even play club. One of them plays on an ECNL team, and we lose 2-0. Mind you, I played a five. I think I played a 5-5-0. So I like hardcore
Good
worked
old
for
mid block.
the, like no. I told the girls. I remember walking into practice and said, "Look, I don't care about the next 2 games." That's what I told them, because I told we had like C and Catholic, and then we had Flagstaff, and I said we're gonna learn how to park the bus. I I'm not gonna be mad at you guys if we lose by a lot to C and Catholic, but what I'm trying to do is trying to avoid getting blown out by Flagstaff. Okay, coach. So for like 3 days straight, we were just practicing and parking the bus. And I said we're not gonna play with any forwards. We're just gonna literally get our 10 players on the field and just put it between the mid circle and the top of the 18. My keeper had 35 saves that game. Walk away with 2-0 loss. Not only did she have one game with 35 games, I mean, our roster wasn't deep. We struggled a little bit. The girls, all this stuff. We had a good group of girls that they actually liked each other. So, long story short, I know she's a really, really good goalkeeper. I know if I were to bring her into my program where I was coaching at, I look like a star. But you know what I did? Because I know she's so good, I told her parents, I said, look, I know I coach at XY school. There's an opportunity if it comes down to that's what you need. But here's the contact of other schools that we should reach out to because I feel that your daughter deserves to do more. I will always, and any coach at any level should always put the priority of that child over anything else. I'd rather get marginalized and saying, why didn't you bring her over? Because I said, because she was too good to be part of this program.
Yeah.
I'd rather be marginalized for that than me saying, oh, I brought you in, I look good, and then you don't go anywhere with your talent.
Yeah, it it is so hard. And this is why we talked about this earlier, to research the programs and don't fall into the pitfalls or the pigeonholes of, for example, I know Phoenix College scrimmages Phoenix Rising every year. They will play, and they do a weird scrimmage where I think they play like 45-minute sections so that they can have different lineups play against, different Phoenix Rising lineups and things like that. And if I'm recruiting a kid for PC, I would use that 100%. Hey, if you come to our JUCO and you come play for us, you can get exposure from the professional team, right? And for a lot of kids who are 18, 19 years old who might want to, play a couple years of JUCO, maybe go D1, then go play professional, or, be like a couple of the kids earlier this year in Phoenix Rising that did have professional contracts, but then decided to go D1. If I'm those kids, I'd be like, oh yeah, dude, I want to get exposure to play a professional team 100%. But what they don't know and what they don't realize is the professional team isn't looking at JUCO for players. There's such a big disparity of skill set, maturity, expectation that Phoenix College has versus Phoenix Rising. Even if Phoenix College beat Phoenix Rising, 3 to 4 goals to 0, right? they might be like, oh, you guys have some good players, but they're not going to be like, hey, coach, I want your forward to come and trial with us, and we want to sign him out of your JUCO. That's not happening. Very seldomly is that happening. And if that does happen, I'm going to be incredibly suspicious of what that student was being told in the recruiting process, and kind of, maybe not suspicious in like the motives, but definitely would be like, well, what's going on in the process of getting that kid recruited? Because USL Championship, Division II soccer of the United States, a lot of MLS clubs will pull people from USL Championship. That's why all the rosters every year change so drastically. It seems like we're losing 90% of our roster every year and getting a new one for 1 to 2 years. I think it's just super important to kind of just look to research into the program. Another program that we have that you and I are both familiar with are the Madison Dragons, right? Out in BYU, Idaho. And they recruit these kids to play on the club team for the school. And I don't know if it's the same message. I don't even think they're still playing anymore. I think that team's kind of fizzled out. But I remember they would always say, we play the BYU club team, we play UVU, we play Utah State. We're going to give you so much exposure to D1 programs that if you play well enough, they can recruit you. But my group of friends and I were just like, that's not what they're going to do. They have their roster set. Why would they pick some kid who plays in Rexburg, Idaho, who just happened to have a good game against us or might be a good player, but he's 26, 27? Why would I go for him when I can go get an 18-year-old and have a bigger ROI on my investment on him?
Yep.
So I think just at the end of the day, research your program and ask these kinds of questions, right? If they say, hey, we play Phoenix Rising every year and we want to give you exposure to a professional team, it's like, hey, in the last 5 years that you've been doing this, how many of those players have gone to sign with Phoenix Rising? Oh, well, we don't have any. We have some that went D1. It's like, well, no, that's not my question. You're bringing this in as a tactic to get me to sign with you. What is the statistic there? And it's that same thing, right? So I feel like a lot of parents, especially young kids who are 17, 16, 17 years old, who are getting recruited for the first time, they're afraid to ask these questions. And I think for a good reason, because I feel like if they ask these questions, then that takes the opportunity away from them, because the coach doesn't like it when they're being asked these kinds of questions of, here's a coaching point, here's a recruiting point that I can give you. Well, what about this? Can you show me some data on this? I don't actually have any. It just sounds really good to a bunch of teenagers, right? But I think at the end of the day, like, researching and asking those questions is going to be a good thing, and kind of getting rid of this weird culture and ecosystem that we're in, where we want to make everything sound really, really good, so we get people to sign something. It's almost like a used car dealership, right? Like, you can have 0% APR for 18 months, but right after that 18 months on your car, you have to spend X amount of interest on this. And it's an incredibly high interest rate. It gets people in the door to sign, but at the end, it's not what's best for them in the long term.
Yeah, and so, with that being said, I'm gonna say this, and then we're gonna wrap this up, because someone's a little tired, and so am I.
Very much
And
so.
you have a really long day tomorrow too. So, um, one of the things I want to say, kind of talking about the exposure, especially talking about the Madison Dragons and BYU Idaho. Uh, I remember one time, even someone told me, he's like, oh, like, I was coaching, and then they knew that I was coaching. They're like, oh, you should try to be a coach or an assistant coach for the Madison Dragons. And I said, why? Oh, because it looks good on a resume.
No, it
How?
doesn't. No, it doesn't.
And I said, how? And I told him, no. But I told him, and I said, tell me, how does the Madison Dragon look good on a resume versus me coaching for Madison United, who's a local club team, and it's a youth club team. Oh, because if you want to get into the college system, you know, you already have that experience with college players. Not good enough. And I told him, I was like, look, I can tell you this. Now, if I go put a I was coach for Madison United. I took the U16 team who was winless the season before, and then I turned them around and I made them like top 10 in the state. That itself is more impressive than coaching for the Madison Dragons itself. All of you, and I told them like this: all of you guys on the Madison Dragons already has-beens. You guys are just a bunch of kids that wanted to play professionally and didn't get your opportunity. You wanted to play D1, but you chose to come and play, or you chose to come here to a religious institution because either A, you didn't have the opportunity to play somewhere, B, you had the opportunity, but they told you you have to play for us and not go on your mission, or C, a combination of both, or D, you were just not good enough to receive any offers from any other school.
And E,
and then your
tuition's really cheap.
And that too. And so I told him, I was like, dude, at the end of the day, that could maybe work into trying to get into a college system, but not really. Not really at all.
No.
And so, at the end of the day, I agree with you, right? That's kind of even a very Mormon thing to do, to ask those inspired questions of from preach by
critical. Be a critical thinker. Don't take what's given in front of you.
Exactly. Ask questions. Ask the questions, right? And if let's say you do, let's say there is, and I'll leave this last example, and for sure, with this one I'll wrap it up, right? There was a kid in our program who was going to go D2. The school told him, "Oh, we'll give you a full ride." Receives the offer from the university that he was being offered, and then they find out that what they were going to offer him was like a partial scholarship that the university was going to pay for, and they were going to kind of signing up for student loans. So then he was going to still graduate in debt, but the school was going to use that student loan to pay for it, to give him a full ride. And the kids, the kid came from Mexico. English is still not there. Asked one of the coaches, "Hey, can I have I'm going D2," and so the coach said. So the coach asked him, "Hey, I want you to come play, for us." He said, "I'm going to go to D2 program." He's like, "Oh, can I review your offer letter?" Then the coach told him, "Hey, look, this is what they're offering you. If that's what you really want to do, go for it. If you don't, you got a spot on our team." And never be afraid to ask other coaches for it. As coaches, we're here to help, to help the players. And I'll even say this: I've built a decent relationship with the ASU women's coach that I've talked to him before, and I said, "Hey, I have this player here in mind. She's going to be a freshman in high school. What does she need so that she can eventually either A, be part of your program, or B, be able to go D1?" And then he'll tell me, "Yeah, send me her film and I'll send you what she needs, and then, give it to the parents." And so, with that being said, ask those critical questions, use your college coaches, and use your resources, and figure it out, right? That, again, like you said it again and again. Do your research. Just don't go for the glamorous trophies. Go for the program that's going to put you in the best solution. Be mentally tough, right? Be a standard of excellence at all times. And with that being said, I am your host, Freddy Rojas, alongside with Jerrick, and this is our episode for this week for 4P Soccer.
We are still recording.